Namaste, Jai Hind, Happy Independence Day, and welcome. Distinguished panelists on stage, our master weavers, artisans, craftsmen, artists from Banaras visiting, dignitaries, my gurus in the textile field, and all of you who are lovers of textiles who are here this morning. Welcome. So, in India, when you want to show respect, you sort of look down. You don't look at elders in the faces. Today, all morning today and all evening yesterday, I think all our eyes were looking down at the pallus and the borders and all the beautiful saris all around us. So that was a natural thing. And the other thing that occurred to me last evening was this idea called Garbhagraha that is there in temple architecture, and it means womb chamber. I think for all of us who love textiles, to be surrounded by women who love textiles and men who love textiles and in the company of textiles is like being in a womb chamber. It is a memory, it is a link to our ancestry, it is a link to our mothers and grandmothers, to storytelling and nostalgia. And for each of us, there is a story, and we never know when this love of textiles hits us. We have this moment when the love for textiles hits us. In our 20s, we run away from it in a way. We wear bell-bottoms, as Laila has written about, and or jeans, anything but a sari. We are not our mothers. And then it hits us. For me, it happened for the first time when I returned from New York to India in 2005. I met Uzrama and I said, why do you like saris so much? And she said, for women like me, the purity of the unstitched cloth has a resonance. And I've never forgotten that, because every word in that phrase, the purity of the unstitched cloth, now has a resonance for me. So no picot, no fall, none of that for my saris anymore. And Chandra Jain was my second teacher. And I remember when I first met her, it was at the 100 Hands exhibit in Maladavan's house at that time. And there was this beautiful lady wearing a green ilkal sari standing behind a counter, very soft-spoken and mild. And when I exhibited a little bit of interest in the sari she was wearing, she taught me about ilkal and ilkal. And since then, our conversations have continued in that low-key fashion of Chandra Didi. And many of the other, this is the other thing about lovers of textiles, is you accost them, as I have many people here in this room at the Vastra Bharana exhibits, and they are so generous with their knowledge and they are so effortless. But you have to accost them. And the usual way to accost them is to say, what a beautiful sari you're wearing, because they always are in beautiful saris. And that is the conversation starter, which leads to the river weaves. You don't know where it will end up. So for me, like all of you, textiles are emotional connect. They are a source of strength. They are a soul. We are part of a soul tribe, like my friend Madhu Nataraj says. We are lovers of textiles. So for this panel, I have come up with a few questions, and I'm also going to end with a Jaldi 5 and warn the panelists what the Jaldi 5 will be, which would be mostly, what is your favorite sari or what is your favorite weave besides Banaras? What is an underserved cluster or unknown cluster that you would like to bring across? Those are the two. That will be at the end. But first, the proper questions. Shall I start with you? Because so Laila ji, your articles on Facebook, your knowledge, what you have done for the crafts, I think all of us know. But personally, what is your memory of a sari? Do you remember the first time you wore one? And what is your favorite anecdote or resonant memory?
That's actually documented. I don't remember it myself because I was only 2.5 years old, but there's actually a photograph of me wearing a sari, my mother's sari, which had been doubled so that it could be tucked up. And it's quite a sweet little sari. And I probably subconsciously then realized that a sari hides all imperfections. Yes. And so, yes, as you mentioned, I did wear bell bottoms, I even wore bikinis, but my fallback has always been a sari.
And you worked for decades enabling handcrafts and craftspeople become self-reliant. In your view, the topic is past, present, and future. In your view, what core values from the past should guide the future? Because you're an optimist and you said it's not static. So a lot of people like me struggle with purity, motives, and things like that. So what is your view on how the past should guide the future?
Well, I think the past obviously resides in the hands and the heads and the hearts of the weavers themselves. And I think that what we have to inculcate in them and also in ourselves, in our understanding of these traditions, is that is the USP. It will change, colors and fashions change, the depth of, whether your pallo is going to be wide or it's going to be narrow, or if you're going to have a little border, etc. Those things will fluctuate according to what people want at any particular time. And I think through the generations, if you look at Indian miniatures or you look at Indian sculpture, there have been huge changes in fashion. Fashion is not a word that we've invented today or borrowed from the West. The thing is that fashion has to be organic and genuine. It's not something that we should pull from some other country. So, for instance, I think that what is absolutely ridiculous is that today in India, we divide clothing and garments and the sale of them and the shows that are done with them into the fall season, the winter season, the this season. Our Indian seasons are completely different and we should follow them. I mean, and why should we have a beach collection? Yes, you should have a bridal collection because bridal collections are what drives the economy of India. But, you know, to imagine that a beach collection is going to suddenly, conquer India is ridiculous. And for us to sort of try and put these ideas into the heads of weavers is wrong. And we should encourage weavers themselves to have the confidence to say, this doesn't work for us. So their own USP, the motives, the designs, the collections, that is what they have to draw on from. But then they have to be creative about it. They shouldn't replicate that because what went in Mughal India or what went in the time of the Kama Sutras may not be quite appropriate. So we have to change, but what we do has to be built on that continuing stream of tradition. And each area, each thing should have the confidence to look into their past and see how they can develop that for their future and not be imitative. I think with a lot of Indian weavers who feel quite insecure, so they see something that's happening in, say, in Bujori, where Bujori saris are now the big thing. And so they say, okay, let's do that in our tradition. So Irikal saris are now taking on some of those components, etc. Now that is ridiculous because you lose your identity. Your identity is the core, but then you have to be innovative with it.
If identity is core, then design and livelihood being the other three things. If I can push you a little bit. Yesterday you talked about how prosaic English, the English language is, and I agree with you. What Chandra Didi has done upstairs with the Bara Masa, the Varsha Ritu, Grishma Ritu. The question is, the problem for us is handlooms, handcrafts are vernacular art, and English has dominated as our lingua franca. And how do you think the values of vernacularism can be adopted or translated by English?
Language, whether it is English or Hindi or whatever, has nothing actually to do with craft. Craft has its own language. And sometimes it adopts another idiom. I have to tell you a story that when I went to Kutch all those many years ago, which really started me on my craft journey in the late 70s, I was very busy, and rightly so, I think, trying to learn the words that weavers or embroiderers use for their motifs and things like that. And one day we were sitting working together with some Rabari ladies, and I was trying to get a word for a sort of katha brown, sort of with a little bit of purple in it and thing. And I was trying to find this word. And I kept sort of saying, baigan, ye, wo, eat, magar eat ke andar thoda jab bhiga hota hai, to ye, and they were all looking at me and saying, and suddenly this old lady, she must have been about 85, she hit her head and says, Laila Ben, aap Coca-Cola kyun nahi bolte ho? you know so I mean, you just have to take it, and you have to be as quick and as responsive as Ganga Ben was to take what is maybe foreign to you and take it to your own advantage.
Yeah, that's such a great story. So you've talked about the many. So this is the flow of the session. So there will be about 3 questions to each of them, and then we are going to invite the master weavers on stage and some questions for them, and then there will be Q&A time. So um, you've talked about the revivals of Bujodi and Ajrak and Kotpad and many more. I guess the question is, how can we build on the momentum of this and create a bond? For people like me, there is a hunger to learn and connect with the artists, the weavers. People like Chandra Didi and you have done it, but how will you send it towards us?
Well, I think that's a very important question, and how you feel about it is whether which side of your bed you got out in the morning. Because there are days where one feels completely depressed and saying we're being overtaken by trends and things. And I think that somehow we have to see through the force of the power and the potential of the crafts that we have in India, which is such a unique and amazing thing, and our own conviction and love for them, we have to somehow transform handicraft, which has become a sort of rather sad word, which is always used by government officials when they want to, have a subsidy or something, and they say, oh, and it evokes poverty and primitiveness and something. And we have to, however much we dislike these jargons of today, we have to somehow make this word into a brand and to make it valuable. Because until you do that, you have a generation which is built on Instagram and influencers and brands and labels and all that, who will immediately put that position that above that. And I remember Ritu Kumar once, when she funded a project that Dastkar was doing with chicken embroidery many years ago. And she was very generous, and she said, you design a collection for us and I'll pay you so much which you can use for the chicken project and things like that. And I said, well, I'm one design person and I have one sensibility. So what I design for you will not be that different from the collection I do for you, for Seva. And obviously your price points are going to be different and it might not work for you. And she laughed and she said, Laila, I have a clientele which will buy at 10 times the price of anything you sell your kurta. I can sell the identical kurta in my boutique or in my show. Don't worry about it. So why can't we make our products, the products of these wonderful people here, as valuable and as authentic to and desirable to the next generation as a label, a designer label is. Correct. And I think because we tend to play down our thing and we dislike, quite rightly, this kind of jargon and this thing, we are doing a disservice almost, because people don't know about it. They don't necessarily go to some Maidan, to a Dastkar bazaar to buy things. They want to see it, uh, in a mall or whatever. And I'm actually delighted today that thanks to COVID, so many craftspeople have actually got onto Instagram and Facebook because they realize that's the only way they can contact. And so now a whole new generation of people is aware that these things are there. And very exciting things are happening in India, but we have to make it mainstream. We have to see that handloom, handicraft isn't the alternative goody thing to do. It should be the only sensible thing to do.
I think once you fall in love with textiles, each of us will have our own takeaways. And my takeaway has been that if they say handloom, don't bargain with them. Don't bring the price down, because you wouldn't do that in a designer store, like she said. Nandita and I were sharing a story yesterday about Chandra Didi, and I said, she told me, why do you all use a safety pin in your sari? And I said, because it'll fall off. And she said, it's a sexy garment, own it. So no pin. Stopped that too.
I used to not wear a pin here, but now I do.
So it evolves and it is personalized for each person. So Nandita, talk about, your brother has designed this exhibit and your father is an artist and you grew up with handlooms and you wear saris when other actresses wear gowns. Tell us about your thought process and how you own and how you adopt textiles.
I'm not in the right attire. I see that. But you have to forgive me. I injured my elbow. So since morning, actually for the past 1 week, I've been struggling a bit, but it was hurting. So I didn't. So apologies for that. But it's not tokenism. It is what we all love and we wear and over years and years. So yeah, I don't know if it was instinct or a conscious choice, but it began as an instinct for sure, because that's what we saw at home. My mother wore saris and my father, like you said, is an artist. So we grew up with handlooms. I've never in my growing up years, no synthetic material ever just came home, whether it was a sari, whether it was a bed sheet, whether it was a cushion cover, whether it was a parda, it was always hand woven. So it's almost like that's the world that I knew. And it's only much later, even the colors, vegetable dye, now we talk about it. Back in the day, vegetable dyes was far more common in our homes than it is probably today. And the colors, earthy colors that come from the earth literally and from nature, that's what we all grew up with. Only much later you started realizing that it was synthetics and all these other material. And I remember I went to Phulbani, which is now called Kandhamal in Odisha, after my master's in social work. I was doing my block field work there in a small village, and I was all of 19, I think. And there was no electricity, there was no tap. I was living in a very sort of humble home of a teacher. And I would see a lot of women wearing synthetics, and coming from my kind of background and being a little righteous about it, I was quite judgmental. And I was like, why aren't they wearing cotton, and why aren't they wearing, their weaves are so good? And it was a mixed culture, because a lot of the handicrafts which was natural to them, because it was a forest area, they would use, but they would also have a expired Fair and Lovely, which bothered me a great deal. And a lot of them wore synthetic saris. When I actually started interacting, because I lived there for 2 months, and they said, well, this is so much cheaper. It doesn't crumple, the color doesn't come off, and most of all, it was just affordable. And so it was easier for me to sit on my high horse, and because I had the privilege, wearing natural fabric actually is a privilege, economic privilege as well. And that was quite an eye opener when I realized that, we have to also understand the other, and, instead of judging why they wear synthetics. And so that was kind of a little bit of a turning point in the way I looked at our crafts and saying, okay, we have to make it affordable. And many of the things that you were saying, Laila, I just wanted to say ditto, ditto, ditto. The only thing I would add to that is that while we want to make it a brand, I mean, I'm often caught between that. How do we maintain the purity, the authenticity, the genuineness of this whole process, of this beautiful material and all of that, and yet get into that market and play that game? So it's that fine balance, that how do we retain that? And in some ways, Fab India is a good example, because, at one point we all grew up probably with Fab India kurtas. My father would only wear that. We would buy clothes. There was one N block market in Delhi, if you remember. And now it's all over. And I barely now go to Fab India. And this is not to make it personal. And sometimes it troubles me because there are things that are not really up to the mark, or really authentic, or really, hand woven. But the fact that so many more people now at least wear cottons or silks or natural fabric. So I'm sometimes caught between how puritanic do we want to be? At the same time, how do we retain that soul? And, so sorry, I've sort of digressed, but to answer your question, that yes, so for me, it was a default thing, but it was also a conscious choice. It's also a bit of laziness, because saris you can wear multiple times. It's what they call slow fashion. There are words for everything today. But saris you can wear 30, I have 30-year-old, 40-year-old saris, some, by my mother, my aunts, my own, that you collect over the years, and they never really get old. You can wear it with a different blouse, you can wear it on a different occasion. So for all important events, I just wear a sari. And a lot of the times people, especially in the film world, say, why don't you wear a gown or a nice dress? It would really look nice on you. They think probably I'm hesitant. That's not a conscious choice. It's sour grapes. So they kind of tell you always just wear a sari. So I said, excuse me? I mean, there are the variety of saris that we have. For me, there's a greater variety in that than, let's say, a gown. Or to me, all the gowns pretty much look the same. And I could be judging there. But, but saris have each sari is so distinct. We can see it here. We can see it on in the auditorium. So yeah, so this is an instinct and a conscious choice to uphold these saris, and by the weavers. I'm so happy, Chandraji. I have to say, you every time name the weavers in your, on stage, yesterday, today. But even yesterday when I was choosing the saris, she called one of the master weavers and says, "Aap bataiye, ye pehni chahiye ki ye dekhni chahiye?" Because otherwise, lot of the crafts communities are just nameless, faceless people. My father is setting up an art center in Odisha, and the idea of having folk, tribal, classical, and contemporary visual art together is to give all of it the same respect. Today we know the names of contemporary artists, but we call the crafts communities as artisans, and we kind of put them on a slightly lower level, which is such a disservice to our beautiful heritage. So, yeah, I hope I went all around and still answered your question.
No, you did. And there you have it. I think where anyone who works with the hands, you are confronted with contradictions. On the one hand, Laila ji was saying we need to make handlooms a luxury good. And it is. And I agree with her. And on the other hand, the people who make these luxury goods cannot afford to wear them. So that is what Nandita was saying, which is, so then what do you do? Do you go, the price point goes down or up or both? Like the Ganda Berunda, we have two heads looking the opposite direction. But I'll ask you a very specific question, Nandita, which is something that I think I confront. What do you tell yourself when you go to a party or a film event, and you're going to be the only one in a sari? And then do you say, I'm going to wear it anyway, and answer all the questions like you just had. So how do you make yourself do it? Or do you cave and say, acha, I'll just...
I don't even think about it.
You don't think about it.
No,
Well,
I mean, I love saris. I wear it because I want to wear it. And, I'm not really answerable to anyone. And sometimes I do get that question that, again, you're wearing a sari. Like, why don't you change your image? There's this big thing that my well-wishers, it's not people who, they really... sort of are saying it for my good. So they kind of tell me that, why don't you change your image? So you don't be trapped in any image, you have to be yourself. You're not sort of chasing an image or trying to change it. This is what I feel most comfortable wearing. And for instance, today, I knew that I would be a slight odd one out. And, I still gave a disclaimer of my hand, but actually there shouldn't be any, we shouldn't be judging. We often judge each other as well. Within those community, I'm saying the they and us, within the us, we judge each other so much that, why this, why that. I think it's time to kind of break these walls and expand that circle to be able to say, if this is not absolutely pure, but it's still on their way, which is what I think Laila was also trying to say, that we don't have to be so puritanic about things. We can embrace. I also don't like the word brand and trend and all of that. And I've been a hesitant actor, filmmaker, and I struggle in my own field because we also have to market it. And, I'm like, oh God, network, market, all these new words is not part of my vocabulary. Even success, something that's such a normal word. We didn't grow up with this idea of success and, how will you be successful now that you're successful? It's always been about the journey and not sort of where you reach. So there are these struggles, but I think it's all about intention. If the intent is right, if the person was probably wearing the cotton for the first time and it's not as pure or not as rooted, but that person has made the effort and has had some thought, I think we could sort of embrace that. So I think a lot of it is about where you're really coming from. What's the intention behind it?
So not this or that, but all of the above, I think is, yeah.
Each to their own.
Each to their own, yes. Chandra Didi, I mean, I learned so much from you with every conversation. The last time we spoke was actually 1 week before this exhibit, and she was going crazy organizing for it. And she sent in a Festival of India greeting card. And I called her and I said, I don't know anything about this because I'm not from Uttar Pradesh. Half an hour conversation on something that had nothing to do with textiles was not a service to her because really it was time away, but still so much I learned. Can you share a personal memory of a sari that is meaningful or made you fall in love with handlooms?
You have asked me a very difficult question because I don't have just a memory. I have my whole mind full of memories because I really was very privileged. I grew up in a family where at that point of time, because it was post-independence time when I was born, the family was still totally with khadi and also only with handlooms. So I really grew up surrounding. I didn't even know that there could be anything else. And the sari was, of course, the first love. I think I was probably just about 3 years old, maybe a little older than Laila was when she got her sari. My father had gone to Banaras for something, and he brought back 2 baby saris. They used to get those baby saris. Later on, of course, somehow I noticed that baby sari had got turned into a clothes bag because recycling was also so much in the family that things were made out of that. And I went home and I saw that my mother had stitched that sari into a bag in which the old clothes were kept. But so that was, can you imagine that to get a baby sari, which you wrap around yourself, you pretend to be grown up, you play with your dolls, you do. The sari was like this endless, seamless kind of fabric which could give you that comfort. And Amma's sari meant so much to me. So I would say, and then as I was growing up, looking at the beauty of the saris. And again was very fortunate being in a family where all these little connections were so automatically made. The festival would come and everybody would wear, like for Tej, the Shravana festival in the north, all of us would be in green because we were told, oh, this is to do with the greenery around, the rains are falling. So that identification with nature was so complete and it continued. It has continued with me till now. In my home, also, as the seasons, I was much more aware of the 6 seasons of India. I always used to wonder, what is this fall? We don't have any leaf falling at that time. In fact, that's the autumn time, that's Sharad Ritu. And it's so beautiful. And it's, how can anybody talk about fall? So, like Basant comes and that whole season, I'm so much more in yellow because that's the color associated with it. In the summers, I would be much more associated with the watery colors or the earthy colors and the light fabrics. So it was very ingrained somewhere. So it's very difficult to talk about that. What is my first memory? For me, this has been the thing which has sort of given me identity, which has given me a sense of connecting with the past. It has given me a hope, and that if this nation and this kind of thinking, which brought us philosophers, whether it was Tiruvalluvar in the south or Kabir from the north, which brings in so much meditative and quiet energy into us, probably the whole connection has to continue. And I thought it will always continue. It's only in recent times that I'm a little bit in a shock, if I may say that, because we have, at least my generation, when we were growing up, we could adopt everything from outside and enjoy wearing it, but we remained very grounded. So festival time, wedding time, it was all experimentation. Like even our English, it came from outside, but what the English that we speak is definitely neither British, and I hope it doesn't become American. It's very Indian English. So we have always made things our own because for us, the world was one. And it was so much to learn from everywhere, but without losing your base, your foundation, your identity, and your sense of belonging. So I think that sense of belonging is what I get from a sari.
Beat. I think it's all our heartbeat too at this stage. So, Chandra Didi, you talked about how we discussed Tej as a matter of fact. And in fact, one of the things she told me was that a few days after that is Nag Panchami, and the rains will bring out the snakes. And so when you worship the snake, you don't harm them. So for you, it looks like textiles and sustainability. Now with this day of climate change, natural dyes are a very natural, very intrinsic and natural progression for you. Can you talk a little bit? We all say natural dye, natural dye. Can you tell us why it's important? Why should we care?
Well, natural dyes, after all, 125 years ago. This is a nation which has a long history, and a civilization also which has a very long history. And the chemical dyes came only about 125 years ago. So they were a natural way. And in India, in any case, I think a connection with nature has been so strong. Whether you look at anything, whether it's the food, where Ayurveda also comes in, we eat according to the time of not just the day, but the year. The 12 months that we have are divided in such a way. So there was a connection that you ate what was grown in that season, what gave you energy. You wore things which were suitable to that occasion, to the climate of that time. In summer, nobody wore very thick clothes. In Kutch, when I went, I'm sorry, just digressing a bit, Kutch, when I was also working after the earthquake, and I saw those beautiful women wearing their traditional clothes, but wearing synthetic clothes. Now, the clothes were designed, lehengas are so airy, so however many folds, they keep the body cool. The blouses were like without the bag so that they could air, they could be comfortable. And then when the similar looking, identical prints came onto the synthetic and they started making, because it was cheaper, therefore they made that and started wearing it, stopped weaving many of those weaves themselves. They started getting all those, the prickly heats and skin issues, etc. So the realization started dawning that sometimes we go after, we think it's a development, it's an advancement, and we bring in things and inflict upon ourselves what is really neither good for the planet nor for ourselves. So natural dye have been discovered. Ratna has done so much work in natural dyes. Kutch has actually never gone away from natural dyes. Rajasthan has natural dyes. It's all there. So it's nothing new that we have discovered now. It's been there. The natural dyes have just not made any presence. The reason being that it is so easy to get one color and mix it in 10 minutes. And they are magicians with color. In Banaras, in fact, the reason why this exhibition has all the processes, because there's so many people who are involved in preparing the yarn when it comes to the loom to be woven. So there, nobody thought about it because the production was so much, whether it is in synthetic or whatever, but the demand was being built up because the marketing was taking over. So I was aware of that and I looked at it and I said, there is so much pollution everywhere because of the chemical dyes. The land has become toxic, the water is becoming toxic. The dyers who are working with the acid dyes, enough research has been done and we know that it affects their lungs. Small closed spaces, they create magic for us, but what happens to them? Lifespans are becoming less. So I said, look, just has to be done. It's a very challenging task, but a little small baby step, if we can at least establish that, maybe it will be able to go forward and bring about a lot more sustainability and a lot more of well-being in that area. And of course, the colors, because the colors, if you look back, even the old saris, because I'm a real hoarder and keep on getting saris which probably belong to somebody's grandmother or whoever, and the colors that we see in the Banarsi saris were always gentle. They were very soft, very gentle colors, only for even the bright color that we used, which was kacha gulabi. So that was the only color which was not a fixed color, but it was used and it was used for the brides, for our ornis to bring all that. But the rest of them had a certain depth which echoed with nature. So looking at that, and I looked at that till probably the early 60s, they still managed to get the same colors because the earlier saris are more gray, the soft greens, the soft pinks, those kinds of colors. So even with the chemical colors, they were trying to get those colors out. So when we did this workshop, and I'm so grateful to my master weavers who are sitting there because to get motivated and compelled by this sense of responsibility that yes, if we can do something, maybe something new will start, which will help the river, the land, the people. So that's where our journey began, and where now we are, that there is that confidence after sitting and pounding the flowers and boiling the colors and taking hours and hours to do it, that now the confidence is there that it can be brought back with a lot more sustainable production also.
Huh. I think one question that confronts all of us is how do you make an ancient weave like the Banaras weave relevant for today's times? I'm going to ask Chandra Didi that question, but I would urge you all to go see the exhibition because, like Gandhi said, my life is my message. That work is her message, essentially taking an old technique and natural dye technique and making it contemporary. But would you like to answer how does one do this in a much more...
You know, what is contemporary? I'd like to ask you that question. Because what is contemporary today, 10 years hence, is not going to be contemporary. But is there something, if we have so much that has come to us, why has it come to us? Because it was valuable. And it was not static that it got produced on one day like one computer. Even there are changes and it's evolving. But this tradition definitely, and with time, with the kind of rich influences that one has had in the country, you know, we kept on adding on to all these traditions, and whatever was valuable stayed, lasted through the test of time. So when I look at these weaves where there are so many techniques, and I'm focusing myself only on Banaras right now because India has these thousands of things, but the Banaras itself, and that's the reason why I'm staying with it, because my one lifetime is not enough. A lot more people need to get into it, a lot more people need to infect the next generation with it so that it all continues, the techniques continue. So, in trying to make it contemporary, trying to make it contemporary also, if you start translating it into money, then I think then, you know, we are losing the real essence of it all, because the handwork is something which is always priceless. And the anonymity that it has had till now, I mean, that has also given us this very expanded sense of being. Now when some designer goes there and works there and then come out that this is my design, and I look at it and it's just a little variation or some change in that or some inflicting of something from outside on it, and it becomes theirs. How does it become anybody's, really? It's a new interpretation, perhaps, you know. So contemporary is a very difficult word to answer, because I think if the tradition, the foundation of tradition went away, what will you play upon? What will you fabricate upon? Even in dance, you know, I mean, everybody talks about that, oh, you know, Bharatanatyam is this and this is that. We should only do contemporary. But the basic steps, the basic understanding only comes from the foundation that has been laid down. Then you do experimentation. So, contemporary can perhaps be experimentation that keeps on happening as long as we don't push our viewers to start producing things which they can't relate to, which don't relate to any thing that connects us with our own identity or the craft.
So there are two buzzwords this decade. One is sustainability, which Chandra Didi has addressed, and the other is inclusiveness, which our next panelist will address. Because you have combined revival, you love textiles, clearly, and you have combined revival with empowering differently abled artisans. So Ratna ji, can you talk a little bit about how you can do both inclusiveness and...
I don't know. I've really done so much revivals. I have done natural dyes, yes. And we have revived saris in Varanasi. We have contacted master weavers and we were able to source very old saris, like 2-3 generation ago saris from old families. And we went and talked to the elderly ladies and told them that, look, can you give us the sari to copy? And the incentive for them was, and they couldn't wear it because it was in tatters. It was it was in shreds, but the pattern was very visible. And we would tell them, look, we'll give you the first sari of the loom. free of charge. But give us this pattern, because that was impossible to, that the present patterns don't come. And somehow, for me personally also, the classics, they never go out of style. It always remains, like no matter what your function is. I mean, like Nandita wearing a sari for the film festival, or somebody else going for something else. It's always, when you wear a classic sari, it's, I mean, you are somebody. You know? So that is what I always held. So this project that we had when we were in Varanasi, the 9 years that I spent there, was one of the most beautiful periods of my life. And we would take the saris, of course, look after it with great reverence. Unfortunately, we couldn't photograph and take it because the weaver needed to feel the texture and the border. So we had to take it to him. So we took it. I even bought a sari from London from an elderly lady that my daughter-in-law knew, and showed it. And it was one of the biggest hits when we sold it. So that, that is the kind of revival I've done. Unfortunately, I could not do it with natural dyes because at that time there were no facilities in Varanasi for us to do it, and the logistics of dyeing it in Munnar and Kerala and taking it back, the cost would have been multiplied by X numbers, which was just not possible. So that's about the revival, but it was beautiful. But the uniforms we did at Varanasi, that was it was again after a great deal of 5 years of persuasion. My husband was working for the Taj at that time. I used to keep telling you, your girls can't be wearing this crepe saris with mission embroidery. It's so shameful for the Taj hotels to be wearing this. And so finally, after 5 years, I was arguing with him about this. And at that time, NDTV brought out a program where they were showing an old, I mean, a young family. The young mother, she must have been in her late 20s, and she already had 5 children. And the eldest was about 10 or 12, and the youngest was a baby in arms. And she was, her husband had died because he was donating blood for income. There was no other, work had died. All the work was dried up. So he was supplying blood, and he did it once too often. And of course, the result was he died. And Sarah was a young girl in her 20s with 5 children, and the neighbors were pitching in, giving them handful of rice and stuff like that. So, and the elder son, who was about 10 or 12, he was going to um, work, for the breadwinner in the family. So that was very monumental moment for me, because my husband happened to see it, and on the spot he said, "Yes, you can do it." So that's how I went to Varanasi. I went to Varanasi. I had absolutely no idea how to weave a sari, what the construction was like, and what was involved. But all I knew was that we had to get a sari done. And we identified a very good village, Sarai Mohana. And when we went there also, the people did not open up to us immediately, because they were used to designers coming there, promising them the earth and the heaven, and then getting them to do the sampling and then disappearing. So they thought we are going to do the same. So we had to convince them. So we gave them medical camps. We got their children admitted into the Krishnamurti Foundation School, which was fortunately to the neighborhood. We treated all the women who had lots of medical issues. And so and then solar lights, because they were all working in the dark and their eyes were really bad. At the first camp itself, we distributed something like 85 pairs of spectacles. So that is the kind of thing that we had to do to convince them, look, we are here to stay. We are not just going to make one sample and disappear. So when they saw that we were willing to do all this for them, they realized, okay, we will help them. So then they started weaving the sari. And the sari was, I must very proudly say, it was a great hit. It just, the girls, when they wore it for the first time, the guests would stop them in the corridor and touch and feel it and say, so beautiful, so beautiful. It really was a beautiful sari. So, it started with that. And then, to my horror, one day when I walked into the dressing room, I found the sari all discarded on the floor. And that really hit me. So I told them, look, you have to treat this with respect. So they couldn't understand what I was being so emotional about. Then the next visit, when I went to Varanasi, I went to a weaver's house, and what do I see? They had wanted a picture of the sari, the girls wearing the sari for their own collection. We had taken a picture and taken it to the weavers, and this guy had framed it, and it was in his puja room, the wall which was his puja room. And I took a picture of that wall and took it back to Bombay, showed it to the girls, and said, "Look, this is what the sari means. So please realize you cannot just put this on the floor. You have to treat this with respect. It is a special project and a special product." So that is how the sari, the work in Banaras involved. And I wish I had the opportunity to do it in natural dyes, but it was not practical.
Well, you have a friend who's doing it now.
No, a natural dye, unfortunately, is very labor intensive. So, and high amount of water is resource. Like it goes through at least 8 to 9 washes. So there's a lot of water, and the quality of the water, the pH level has to be the perfect 7. So that is not possible. In Varanasi does not have that kind of water. So all these things put together, and if you have to do it in Munnar and bring it all the way, the cost would have been phenomenal. So
you do what you have to do.
yes, you have to make do. But
So I'm going to ask you a question which in various ways I've asked the panelists. How do you innovate without losing your soul? How does one man balance forward looking with history, anchored being in history? So when you have worked with various clusters and you've made some innovations, what is your take on it?
I have never innovated. I have always gone back to the classics, because I'm a great believer in classics, and which would never go out of fashion.
Which is what she was saying. Yeah.
So, when you do a innovator, it is there for a short season. Everybody says, "Oh, it's like that blouses that came with that hole here," which was horrible. On the sleeve, it really looked so ugly. And I was wondering who on earth would do this, something like this. And that's it. And it was a short spell, and then it just thankfully disappeared. But they do have, like this one, for instance, the inspiration is from Starry Nights, Van Gogh's. So they have, they take inspiration from nature. They don't copy. I discourage them. You cannot copy it; it will not be accepted. But you experiment. We are, if something is spoiled, doesn't matter. We can always rework or something out, but do not copy. And as much as possible, go back to the tradition. So that is how we have been. So I have never innovated. I don't believe in innovation. I don't know whether I'm right, but that's my personal view.
So we are at 12:35, and we are soon going to call our artists on stage. But I have one question for the audience. How many of you has a memory of either being in what we call in Tamil a tuli, which is a sari strung to become a cradle on a train, or anywhere else? How many of you has that memory or that experience of just a show of hands of you literally being in the womb of a sari as a baby? Yeah, quite a lot of us. Yeah. And now we carry the American, whatever the thing that you wear on top. We don't, but they still, I've seen women, especially from the Northeast, still use a unstitched cloth textile to carry their baby. So it all is not lost yet. So one very quick one-liner for the panelists. I was going to talk about your favorite cluster, but since this is about Banaras, please say in 1 or 2 lines why you think, what is your favorite memory, or why you think Banaras weaves are special. It could even be a motive that you like, something about Banaras, rather than open it up to all of handlooms in India. So Laila ji, what is a motive or a color or a technique that draws you about Banaras weaves?
I think the Konya paisley on the corner, which somehow links the pallu to the body of the sari, which otherwise very often it's, the pallu is sort of cut off from the rest of the sari. There's a clear line. And here, when you have the konya, there's a sort of a union. I think that's absolutely beautiful.
And Nandita?
I think it just looks very regal and royal. Even if it's simple, there's something about it, unlike the other cotton and silk, it just falls differently. And even if this is such a, in a way, a plain sari, border and a pallu, and yet it really looks regal. I think that's quite unique.
And Chandra?
It's very difficult to say which is my favorite, but I would just tell you one incident. Right in the beginning, when I went to Banaras, and I was sitting in a weaver's house, and at that time, people, they had stopped making konyas because in between it's much more work. I didn't also know, but I'd noticed that it's not there. So I just asked, I said, why is it that there are no konyas? I was fortunately familiar with the term. Konya means kona, and within that, this paisley. So the corner motif. So I said that, I see saris without the konya. And suddenly there were steps, and there was this absolutely elegant gentleman sitting there in his sparkling white clothes and with a white turban, and his beard was also white. He was quietly listening to my conversation, and he pipes up and he says, बनारसी साड़ी बिना कोनिया के नहीं बनती थी, क्योंकि बनारसी साड़ी ऐसे होती है जैसे बिना कोनिया के, जैसे दुल्हन के माथे पर बिंदी नहीं. Basically saying that a bride's forehead without the ornamentation looks so bare, the same way the Banarsi sari looked like that. So it was never woven because it was always woven so beautifully. And that is what completed it. So konya, of course, the paisley, and paisley is generally used in the corner because it fits in very beautifully. Nothing else really gives that flow as the paisley does, but I have lots of motifs. And if you see in the exhibition, because each motif is actually represented with the flower in nature. So it's tough to say. It's like, when you have 5 children, can you say that this one is my favorite?
Ratna ji.
I would go with Laila and say the konya. It's so beautiful, and it's a distinct mark on the sari.
Okay. There will be time for Q&A for our panelists, but now it's time to move on to the next important aspect of this panel. I would like to, with great respect and a lot of taliyas, welcome our master weavers on stage. Shahid Junaid Bhai is the 8th generation of his family to carry forward the legacy of handloom weaving with roots tracing back to his ancestors, originally from Iran, settled in Varanasi, supplying textiles to royal patrons. Junaid Bhai's journey in handloom began with hands-on learning in weaving, dyeing, and design, a passion nurtured by his father. In 2015, he was awarded the National Award for his Kadwa Butidar sari. Am I saying it right? Kadwa Butidar, sorry. Handlooms are regional. I'm a Tamilian. Ask me about Kanchipuram, I will say. But followed by the Sant Kabir Award in 2018. He's a passionate educator, offering free practical training to students at Banaras Hindu University and lecturing at institutions worldwide. Namaste and welcome. Naseem Ahmed is a 4th generation weaver from a family renowned for its contributions to Banaras Hatkarga tradition. Hatkarga. Trained under the guidance of his father, Aziz Ulsur Haq, and grandfather, Muhammad Jafar Ali, who was a National Award recipient, Naseem Bhai has been deeply involved in preserving and innovating traditional weaving and design techniques. His exceptional work, particularly in the revival of the Baluchari sari for Taj Khazana, earned him the National Award in 2008. His commitment to the craft has earned him multiple accolades, including Shilpa Janas Award and the Roshan Kalapesi Award. Namaste. Amrish Kushwaha is a Bachelor of Law from Banaras Hindu University who chose to dedicate himself entirely to weaving for a trade practice for generations in his family. Amrish ji has focused on reviving various brocading techniques and has set up a large number of handlooms. He's deeply committed to keeping the legacy alive. Presently, Amrish ji is the chairman of the Uttar Pradesh Industrial Cooperative Association. I would like to ask you to speak to us from the point of view of practitioners of the craft, and please tell us your.
तो शोभा पूछना चाह रही हैं कि जो इस व्यवसाय को, इस कला को, इतनी पारंपरिक कला का आप लोग चला रहे हैं, तो उसके बारे में आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे इस समय?
कला को हमें जो सिखाया गया, तो हमने तो इसको एक तरह से पूजा, जिसे हम वर्शिप या इबादत कहते हैं, हमने उस तरह से उसको अपनाया और उसी तरह से करने की कोशिश की।
Junaid Bhai is saying, for the benefit of those who don't understand Hindi, that for him, he learned this art as if it's an act of worship, and he has continued to do it as an act of worship. So that's the dedication and devotion that he brings to his art. That's what it means to him. नसीम भाई, आप क्या कहेंगे कि आपका क्या, किस तरह आप सोचते हैं इस समय?
मेरा व्यू ये है कि जो भी जिस कंट्री में रहता है, जिस रीजन में, जहाँ जिस एरिया में, और वहाँ जो भी हो रहा होता है, तो वो उसका जिम्मेदारी होता है कि उसको लेके चले। उसका पूर्वज जब लेके चलते हैं, काम करते हैं, तो हम जब पैदा होते हैं तो बचपन से उसको देखते हैं, सीखते हैं, तो हम भी उसी को करने लगते हैं। अगर हम किसान होते तो हम भी किसानी करते, और हम चूँकि बुनकर के घर में पैदा हुए हैं तो हम भी बुनकरी कर रहे हैं। और सबसे बड़ी बात ये कि हम गौरवान्वित होते हैं कि साड़ी हम बनाते हैं, और भारतीय जो हम साड़ी से पहचाने जाते हैं। साड़ी, भारत के जो नागरिक हैं, औरतें हैं, जो साड़ी पहन के देश विदेश में जाते हैं, तो वहाँ पे लोग पहचानते हैं कि ये साड़ी पहन के आए, तो ये भारत से हैं। तो बड़ा गौरवान्वित होते हैं हम कि हम साड़ी बनाते हैं, और हमारे ज़रिए से आप लोग बाहर जाते हैं तो भारत देश का नाम होता है, तो हमें फ़ख्र होता है।
I think everybody knows enough Hindi. I don't have to translate it, because he just says it's so beautiful that it is a mark of identity, and also being born in a family where he just learns so automatically, organically, and without any effort as he learns to speak. So that's the way it is, yeah.
एक्चुअली पूछे, हम लोग बनारस से हैं, और जब भी बनारस का नाम लिया जाता है तो टेक्सटाइल्स में या बनारसी साड़ी के लिए पूरी दुनिया में जानी जाती है। तो बनारस का होने के नाते इतना पुराना ट्रेडिशनल है, सदियों सदियों पुराना है। कितने 100 साल से बनारस में ये टेक्सटाइल्स पर, सिल्क के ऊपर या बनारसी साड़ी के ऊपर काम हो रहा है। तो हम लोगों ने इसको इस तरह से साधना के रूप में है। बनारसी साड़ी का जो काम है वीव करना, एक तरह से तपस्या है, साधना है। 8 घंटे बैठ कर के काम करना बिल्कुल पेशेंस का काम है, और इसलिए हमने उसको अपनाया कि ये साड़ियाँ जो है बनारस की धरोहर है, हमारी धरोहर। इस धरोहर को बचाने के लिए भी हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं। आज वर्तमान समय में जो है डे टू डे कम जरूर हो रहा है, लेकिन हम लोग पूरी क्षमता के साथ जो है लोगों को सिखा रहे हैं या कह रहे हैं कि बनारस का जो काम है एक धरोहर है, और इस धरोहर चलता रहे। और ये पूरा बनारस में ही नहीं, पूरे वर्ल्ड में इसका एक नाम है। इस नाम को भी करने के लिए हम लोग तत्पर हैं, इस काम को सदा करने के लिए हमेशा।
So beautifully he said it all also, that you know that apart from that sense of pride and everything else, it is really like a tapasya, like a meditative work that for 8 hours every day, the weaver sits and works on it. And it's a dharohar, basically, that this is what we have, what do you call it? Heritage, that we have got, and we need to preserve that heritage and continue with that. And we feel very proud that, Banaras has that distinctive identity, that this legacy is continuing, and we are the carriers of that legacy, and that they are able to make this beautiful garment for us. तो इनका प्रश्न है कि आपने इस पिछले दौर में अपने जो ग्राहक हैं या जो आप बनाते हैं उसमें आपने क्या फर्क देखा है? What difference have you seen?
साड़ियाँ जो हम बनाते हैं हथकरघे पे, वो सिर्फ तन ढकने के लिए ही नहीं, बल्कि हम अपने को किस रूप में कहीं प्रेजेंट करते हैं, उस रोशनी में भी देखी जाती है। ज़माने के साथ इसका बदलाव भी होता रहा है। हम चूँकि हथकरघे पे काम करते हैं, तो कभी साड़ियाँ, कभी ड्रेस, जबकि हमारे यहाँ जिस कम्युनिटी से हम आते हैं, हमारे यहाँ साड़ियाँ नहीं पहनी जाती। हम शलवार कमीज़ इस तरह के कपड़े पहने जाते हैं हमारे यहाँ लेडीज़। तो लेकिन हम उन्हीं डिज़ाइन से जो साड़ियाँ हम बनाते हैं, उसी डिज़ाइन से और उसी टेक्सचर से ही हम वो कपड़े बनाते हैं। उस लिहाज से आज के दौर में जो बदलाव आया, जो नई जनरेशन कुछ साड़ियों से हट करके भी पहनना शुरू कर दी, तो वो चीज़ भी हम हैंडलूम पर बनाने लग गए। और फिर उसके बाद कुशन कवर्स हैं, या यहाँ तक के बेडशीट्स भी बनी। तो ज़माने के हिसाब से हम बदलाव करते आए हैं।
जी, मेरा तजुर्बा ये है कि जब बचपन में हम देखते थे कि साड़ी बहुत मतलब बहुत तायत जो है, ज़्यादातर लोग साड़ी पहनते थे। और बीच में फिर क्या हुआ कि धीरे धीरे साड़ी का पहनावा कम होता चला गया, और थोड़ा सा फैशन शो जब स्टार्ट हुआ तो लोगों ने अपना चॉइस बदला। जो लोग साड़ी पहनते थे वो क्या है कि फिर ज़्यादातर वो ट्राउज़र व पैंट वगैरह पहनने लगे, और फिर साड़ी तब पहनते थे जबकि कोई फंक्शन, साड़ी शादी ब्याह हो तब पहनते, नहीं तो घर में साड़ी की जगह पे वो फिर अपना परिधान अंग्रेज़ी परिधान पहनने लगे। ये इसका इम्पैक्ट हुआ कि वो फैशन शो की वजह से साड़ी पहनना थोड़ा कम हुआ। तो हम लोगों को ये डर सताने लगा कि क्या अब हैंडलूम, हम जो आपके लिए हम काम करते हैं, साड़ी बनाते हैं, आपके ज़रिए से हमारा जो करगा चलता है और हमारे जो वीवर आते हैं, हम लोग जो काम करते हैं, क्या वो सब बंद करना पड़ेगा? तो ये मन में एक डर सा सताने लगा कि क्या ये धीरे धीरे, क्या जापान और जैसे इंग्लिश, अंग्रेज़ जो लोग काम उनके यहाँ भी करगा चलता था, सब बंद हो गया, क्या वो भी एक तरह से किताबों में दफन हो जाएगा? तो ऐसा मेरे मन में ये सब ख्याल आते थे, तो बहुत डर सा महसूस होता था। तो लेकिन ऊपर वाले को तो सबका चलाना है, ऐसा तो बदलाव तो होना है, ठीक है, लेकिन कुछ हमारे समाज के जैसे आप जैसे लोग हैं और सोशल वर्कर, तो उन लोगों ने इस चीज़ को परखा, सीखा और जाना, और पेपरों में भी उसके बारे में छपते थे कि बहुत सारे लोग माइग्रेट करके सूरत अब बॉम्बे वीवर चले जा रहे हैं, करगा बंद हो गया, मशीनीकरण हो गया 1995 के बाद से। तो इस तरह से जो एक तो ट्रेडिशनल चीज़ें हम लोग बनाते थे, और टेक्नोलॉजी का उतना अभाव था कि हम लोग नई चीज़ें पता नहीं कि किस तरह की चीज़ें बनाएं कि लोगों को अट्रैक्ट करें, मार्केट को ग्रैब करें हम। तो ये भी सच्चाई थी। और फिर फैशन प्रस्त जब डिज़ाइनर लोग आने लगे तो उन्होंने अपना एक आइडिया दिया हम लोगों को कि ऐसे बनाइए, ट्रेडिशनल से थोड़ा हट कर बनाइए, कलर ये बनाइए, तो वहाँ से थोड़ा सा उठाव हुआ। तो अब धीरे धीरे हम देख रहे हैं कि काफ़ी चीज़ें बदलाव आई हैं। पुराने ज़माने की जो चीज़ें थी वो मोटिव तो वो ही लेते हैं, कलर आज का बनता है, लेआउट आज के हिसाब से पहनते हैं। आज लोगों को आज के मॉडर्न ज़माने के हिसाब से, उनकी सोच के हिसाब से वो हमको बतलाते हैं, तो फिर हम उसको बनाते हैं। तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें बदलाव आई हैं, उस हिसाब से आज हम काम कर रहे हैं और काम अच्छा मिल रहा है, खुशी है। और आप लोग भी थोड़ा सा और जागरूक हुए हैं साड़ियों के लिए। और साड़ी का एक तरह से नहीं, आज तो साड़ी का स्कूल है, ड्रेपिंग अनेक तरह से वो ड्रैप करके पहनती हैं। अंग्रेज को भी जाके यहाँ के जो हमारे क्लाइंट है वो रहता कपूर चिश्ती सिखाती हैं कि ऐसे पहनो वैसे पहनो, तो वो साड़ी परचेज करती हैं और बड़ा फक्र से वो पहनती भी हैं। तो ये बड़ा गर्व की बात है कि हमारी साड़ी अलग न्यू स्टाइल में अमेरिका में पहनी जा रही है। तो हमारा मार्केट बढ़ रहा है, हमें खुशी हो रही है कि अब जो डर है वो खत्म हो गया है। तो ये सब बदलाव आए हैं।
जहाँ तक हथकरघा पर साड़ी का सवाल है, तो ये परंपरा, संस्कृति और कारीगरी का एक प्रतीक है। और हर धागे पर केवल मेहनत से आत्मनिर्भरता बुनी जाती है। तो हम जो वस्त्र तैयार करते हैं, वर्तमान में परंपरागत तो ट्रेडिशनल भी बहुत दिनों से, सदियों से साड़ी का रहा है, जो है हमारा संस्कृति रही है, सभ्यता रही है। और हिंदू धर्म में जो है साड़ी पहनने का और उसको पूजा के रूप में इस प्रयोग करने का हर घर में रहा है जो है। तो एक धीरे धीरे बदलाव आते गए समय का जो है। और निश्चित रूप से कि हम लोग कभी कुछ ट्रेडिशनल बनाते थे, फिर कुछ और उसमें थोड़ा बदलाव हुआ, बनाया गया वर्तमान समय के अनुसार। लेकिन अगर देखा जाए तो पूर्ण रूप से कहीं से न कहीं हमारा कारीगरी ही उसमें झलकता है। उसमें हमारी जो है आत्मनिर्भरता है, जो है जो हमारी संस्कृति है, जो हमारा धरोहर है, उसमें छिपा हुआ है जो है। हम जब पैनलिस्ट बात कर रहे थे तो हम कहते थे कि बनारसी साड़ी में पेजली जो है, बिना पेजली की साड़ी नहीं बनती है। आज हम साड़ी बनाते हैं, कितना भी बदलाव कर लें, लेकिन एक पेजली कहीं ना कहीं, चाहे वो बॉर्डर में हो चाहे आंचल में हो, वो एक प्रतीक है उसका देने का जो है। तो हमारा जो संस्कृति जो है हमारी बनारस में जो हम बना रहे हैं, तो निश्चित रूप से ट्रेडिशनली भी चल रहा है, लेकिन हाँ निश्चित रूप से डाइवर्सिफिकेशन हुआ है जो है। तो अगर समय की मांग के अनुसार हम लोग जब पहले जैसे हम लोग बनाते थे 30-40-35 साल पहले याद है, तो साटन की साड़ियाँ बनती थी, केले के ऊपर बनती थी बहुत। अब देखने को नहीं मिलती, वो बनारस में नहीं बनता। साटन जो भारी साड़ी होता है, लोगों ने हल्का पहनना शुरू किया, तो उनके अनुसार हम लोग दोदम्मा पर कपड़ा हल्के बनाना शुरू किए, सिल्का बनाना शुरू किए जो है। इसी तरीके से पहले जो है कोरे के ऊपर जो है हमारा मदनपुरा जो है, मदनपुरा और बनारस को दो भाग में बांटते हैं, एक अलईपुरा है, एक मदनपुरा है। तो एक तरफ मोटी साड़ियाँ, मतलब मोटे कपड़े बनते थे, साटन विशुद्ध रूप से कह सकते बनता था। दूसरी तरफ बहुत बारीक काम होता था जो मदनपुरा में होता था। वो भी एक दौर था 25-30 साल पहले कि उसमें बनता था बूटी का, सब रेशम की बूटी की साड़ियाँ बनती थी कोरे के ऊपर। आज नहीं दिखाई देती हैं, लेकिन फिर भी वो दोहराता है। फैशन हमेशा अपने आप को दोहराता है। 30 साल के बाद, 40 साल के एक जनरेशन बीतता है, तो फिर वो नई चीजें हो जाती हैं। तो एक राउंड अप के बाद निश्चित रूप से कोई चीज अगर 30 साल 40 साल पहले बना हुआ, तो उस जनरेशन के बाद हम जब उसको बनाते हैं, दोबारा हम करते हैं, तो कहते हैं नहीं बिल्कुल नई चीज है। तो एक तो उस हिसाब से बनती है, और दूसरा चीज ये है कि जिस तरीके से समय का मांग है उसके अनुसार भी हम लोग बदलते हैं। ऐसी नहीं कि हम बिल्कुल एक ही उस पर चलते रहें। और निश्चित रूप से जो कस्टमर का डिमांड होता है, जैसे सुझाव होते हैं, और सबसे बड़ा फीडबैक तो आप जैसे लोगों का होता है, और कि किस तरह का चाहिए होगा, कि उससे क्या फ़ायदा हो रहे हैं, क्या परेशानियां हो रही हैं, किस तरह के कलर चाहिए होंगे, जो है कौन सा सीजन है हमको। तो आप लोगों से बहुत बड़ा फीडबैक मिलता है। जब फीडबैक मिलता है तो हम लोग के जो हैं, जो कस्टमर्स को बताते हैं कि नहीं ऐसा चाहिए, तो उसी हिसाब से हम लोग बदलाव करते हैं। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू। मेरी अंतिम प्रश्न ये है कि आपका फेवरेट मोटिव, द वन आई आस्क्ड देम, आपका फेवरेट मोटिव या कलर आपको इन बनारस?
सच पूछा जाए तो हमारी पसंद कुछ नहीं है। जो हमारे बायर्स या हमारे पहनने वाले कंज्यूमर्स की जो पसंद है, हम सबसे बढ़िया पसंद हमारी वही है। वो जो चाहते हैं वो हम बनाएं। और रंगों का जहाँ तक सवाल है, अगर हम सिर्फ भारत की ही बात करें तो भारत में अलग अलग क्षेत्रों में अलग अलग तरह के रंग पसंद किए जाते हैं। एज के हिसाब से रंगों का चुनाव होता है। तो जैसा हमसे उम्मीद की जाती है, हम मांग नहीं कहेंगे, जैसी हमसे उम्मीद की जाती है हम उस तरह के कलर बनाने की पूरी कोशिश करते हैं। शुक्रिया।
मेरा अपना मत है कि मुझे जो कलर बहुत अच्छा लगता है, पसंद है, तो जब से चंद्रा मैम लॉकडाउन पीरियड में आई, और उसके पहले तो सपना था कि पता नहीं नेचुरल डाई हम कर पाएंगे कि नहीं कर पाएंगे। तो ये आपका बहुत शुक्रिया, धन्यवाद देता हूँ कि आपने हम लोगों को मोटिवेट किया और आई और अपना कीमती समय निकाल के बनारस में आई। जगदा राजप्पा जी को लेकर आई जो एक्सपर्ट है हैदराबाद से, और हम 4-5 वीवर को लेके इन्होंने 5 दिन मुसलसल एक वर्कशॉप करके हम लोगों को सीखने का एक मौका मिला इनके ज़रिए से। तो हम इनको धन्यवाद देना चाहेंगे और राजप्पा जी को भी धन्यवाद देना चाहेंगे। और तब से वो एक सिलसिला शुरू हुआ। तो हमको इंडिगो डाई बहुत पसंद है, लेकिन दिक्कत ये है, तकलीफ़ ये है कि हम अभी भी सेटिस्फाई नहीं है कि उसको हम कैसे अपने मनचाहा जो जिस तरह से चाह रहे हैं वो हम कलर हासिल कर सकें। तो हम निरंतर उसमें प्रयासरत हैं कि कैसे हम वो अपना मनचाहा कलर हम पा लें, और उसमें हम लगातार काम करते रहते हैं। और हो सकता है कि हमको मुन्नार भी जाना पड़े। रत्ना बहन से हम रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि हमको एक मौका दें आप, तो वहाँ जाकर हम सीखेंगे। धन्यवाद, धन्यवाद, हम ज़रूर आएंगे। तो इंडिगो डाई मेरा बहुत पसंदीदा कलर है। वैसे तो मैरीगोल्ड है, हल्दी है, रतनजोत है और मंजिष्ठा है, सप्पन, ये सब तो है ही है। नेचुरल डाई मेरा सपना था जो हम कर रहे हैं और बहुत खुशी के साथ कर रहे हैं, और लोगों ने अप्रिशिएट भी किया है। और मुन्नार जाएंगे इंशाल्लाह, मुन्नार वहाँ पे सीखेंगे और इंडिगो करेंगे। और जो मोटिफ की बात है, तो मोटिफ में हमको मुगल पैटर्न बहुत अट्रैक्ट करता है। मुगल पैटर्न में क्या है कि एक कुदरती फ्लावर, उसमें कुदरती रंग, 4-5 रंगों के रंग होते हैं, फूल पत्ती होती हैं, तो उसमें अजीब सा झुकाव होता है, उसमें टहनियाँ होती हैं, पत्तियाँ सूखी हुई होती हैं, कहीं हरी हुई होती हैं, तो वो हमारे दिमाग में
माइक
जी, तो वो बहुत अट्रैक्ट करता है हमको जो है पत्तियाँ। सो उससे हमको एक प्रकृति का एक लगाव महसूस होता है। तो हमको फ्लोरल पैटर्न जो है, इस तरह की चीज़ें हमको बहुत पसंद है, बहुत करने का मन करता है और करते भी हैं।
जहाँ तक रंग का प्रश्न है, ये बड़ा एक कठिन क्वेश्चन है, डिफिकल्ट है जो है कि जब हम कहीं पर भी कुछ खरीदने जाते हैं कपड़े में, तो सबसे पहला हमारा जो निगाह जाता है वो कलर के ऊपर ही जाता है। साड़ियाँ लगी होती हैं, हम लोग रखे रहते हैं, तो कस्टमर सबसे पहले देखता है कि किस कलर की साड़ी जो है, तो उसका पसंद क्या है, पसंदीदा कलर। तो कलर के ऊपर ही सबसे पहले देखता है, बाद में डिजाइन देखता है और कपड़े का फील करता है और क्वालिटी देखता है, लेकिन कलर सबसे पहले फर्स्ट देखता है जो है। तो अब कलर के लिए जब हम लोग का निश्चित अलग अलग तरीके से, जैसा हम लोग डिस्कस किया अभी कि वेडिंग कलेक्शन है जो है, अब शादियों का समय है तो वेडिंग के अनुसार ही कलेक्शन होना चाहिए जो है, यंगस्टर हैं तो उनके लिए कलर होना चाहिए जो है। तो उस हिसाब से उसके अनुसार अलग अलग जो है, भारत में विभिन्न क्षेत्रों में अलग, तो कहीं पेस्टल चलता है, कहीं पर बहुत ब्राइट कलर चलता है जो लोग पसंद करते हैं। तो पहले तो ये होता था कि शादियों में एक निश्चित रूप से साउथ में 8-10 कलर होते थे और जो ब्राइट होते तो वही चलता था, लेकिन अब कलर जो है काफ़ी पेस्टल चल रहे हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा जो है डिमांड भी हुई है पेस्टल का कलर का। लेकिन उस सब कुछ के बावजूद ये है कि हम लोग भी बड़े ज़्यादा साड़ी बनती है, सभी लोगों को काम देना है, तो जिस तरह से डिमांड होता है तो हमको बायर्स खुद बताते हैं कि हमको इस तरह का कलर चाहिए, उस हिसाब से जैसे पसंद होता है कस्टमर्स का, उसी हिसाब से कलर हम लोग बनाते हैं। और बहुत सीट्स हमारे यहाँ जो है अलग अलग जो कलर के जो हैं। अब जहाँ तक सवाल है जो है नेचुरल डाई के ऊपर, तो नेचुरल डाई वास्तविक करना थोड़ा टफ भी है, और ये जो नेचुरल डाई है कहीं अलग अलग चीज़ों हम देखते हैं कि नेचुरल डाई अगर एक बार एक कलर आ गया तो फिर मैं कोशिश करता हूँ कि सेम कलर आ जाए दोबारा उसी में, तो मुश्किल होता है थोड़ा जो है उसका। ये भी देखा गया है कि जो समय का जो अभी जो परिजात है, परिजात का फूल पहले खिला जो है बहुत बाद में खिला, तो उसमें बड़ा अंतर होता है जो है। परजात का कहीं पहले से बरसात में शुरू हुआ या कहीं जाड़ा में शुरू हुआ तो उससे बड़ा अंतर होता है। गेंदे के भी इसी तरह से जो है, तो वो हर एक कलर लाना भी एक प्रॉब्लम है कि सोचे कि एक तरह का बिल्कुल कलर आ जाए तो ये मुश्किल है। आज हमने रंगा, कल फिर उसी तरह का आ जाए। लेकिन हम बिल्कुल कहेंगे कि जो नेचुरल डाई का कलर है वो बहुत ही अच्छा, देखने को भी बहुत अच्छा लगता है देखने में जो है, और फायदे भी उसके बहुत हैं स्किन वगैरह के पर्पज से देखा जाए जो है। और दूसरी सबसे बड़ी बात है कि उससे जो आपका ये है प्रदूषण है जो है वो भी बहुत ज़्यादा कंट्रोल होता है जो है। पानी के साथ हम रेसी जब डाई करते हैं तो गंगा नदी में जाता है, बहुत इस तरह से, या डाई करने वालों के लिए, स्वास्थ्य के लिए वो है। लेकिन अगर ये हो जाता है तो उसका प्रदूषण से बहुत ही बचाव है जो इसका। और वैसे मेरी बेटी डॉक्टर अनका कुशवाहा है, वो काफ़ी जो है नेचुरल डाई के ऊपर ही काम कर रही है। चंदा मैम के बाद अब उसको बहुत सारे और काम हो रहे हैं जो है, फॉरेन वगैरह से काफ़ी अच्छी बात हुई है, कल भी वो काम कर रही है रेगुलर जो है, तो वो काम हो रहा है नेचुरल डाई के ऊपर जो है।
Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful to hear everybody, including the master weavers who've come from so far away, and of course, all the distinguished people on the panel. Many thanks. My question is that a lot of you have already done so much work in the field to bring all these beautiful products to us who are a privileged few. And because we're just a privileged few, very few people get work because it is so limited and the clientele is so limited. Is there something that we can do in policy, in working with the governments to, for instance, provide a basic structure for the weavers? For instance, if we were to do school uniforms in like a basic ikat in Orissa from Sambalpur, and all the kids were dressed in ikat instead of in whatever it is that they're wearing these days, or whichever state has a tradition of some textile, have that textile, so that all the weavers have some basic work. And then from there, you can build on the more finer work for the more privileged classes. That way, we won't lose our weavers to the tech industry and other God knows where.
How to democratize textiles, and also the weavers should.
I think that's a very interesting question. It has a lot of dimensions. And I think that that is the issue, that not all weavers, we have, I think now, about 63 lakh master weavers, and each of them probably supports about 10 or 15 more. So that's a huge number. But each one of those communities is different and their needs are different. So yes, Naveen Patnaik has actually in Orissa started saying that government schools should wear handloom and ikat uniforms, and that has started. But when you do that, you also run the danger that you make something which is an exclusive and special type of weave into a mass-produced weave, and that doesn't work for everybody. I mean, it certainly wouldn't work in Banaras. So I think you have to look, and government has to look at each community, each tradition, and see what works for it. Yesterday, somebody who came to the exhibition was very, very shocked at actually how low priced the saris were, and thought that 20,000 or 30,000 for such an intricate and fine weave, which takes so long, should be priced much higher. There are other things, and then somebody who's a bureaucrat or a planner who may not have much knowledge would be outraged at the idea of it's just 6 yards of cloth. Why does it cost so many thousands of rupees? So you have to study each, as I said, each community, each technique, each what, and see what works for each. I think the issue is to understand the diversity and therefore the diversity of needs and solutions, and also not to lump all crafts or all weavers into the same generic basket and find a generic solution. I think that's what's very important.
Laila, this is a question for you. Yesterday you talked about,
This is Geeta Rao in
Yeah.
front.
yeah, this is a question for you. You mentioned, you talked about Chinese traders coming to Banaras, taking back weavers with them. I mean, we are just completely, many of us are really intrigued about this phenomenon and how it works. And is it true that where do they sell these products?
They sell
And
them actually to India itself. You can find them everywhere. When you find, and from a distance, it does look actually quite authentic. But when you find nearer, but actually I'm more worried by the fact that, Chinese are coming and learning some of our crafts and skills, is the fact that they can do it and they can find a market, because we don't actually patronize and encourage and support the people here who have that skill. And one of the reasons, I think, which we haven't talked about at all, is yarn. I mean, I think more scary than Chinese buyers coming to India to learn skills is the fact that we are importing Chinese silk from China instead of encouraging our own wonderful mulberry and airy silk cultivation. And so that weavers who can make the most extraordinary saris are using Chinese silk, which is very shiny, which crumples a lot, and which completely spoils the character of the thing. And I find this absolutely appalling. And so I think that all of us have to put pressure not just on one aspect of what is wrong with the textile chain, but starting from the base, which is raw material. And unless weavers, not only the Banaras silk weavers, but even the cotton weavers, they're not getting the right quality of yarn. And we're choosing yarn, cotton yarn, which works in the power loom or in the mill and not for handloom. There was a time when every corner of India where there was a weaving unit, people had a weaving tradition because there was the indigenous raw material, the cotton or the yarn or the wool or whatever. And now half those things are not available. So I think that's a very crucial thing.
On behalf of the textile lovers of Bangalore, many of whom I know and who are here, I would like to thank Kadambari and Chandra Jain for putting this magnificent exhibit together and bringing us all together. Oh, you want to say one? Oh, sure. Okay.
I think this wonderful event that Chandra has put together is based on the river and is based on the weaves of Banaras, and the river and the weaves flow together so beautifully. But let us also remember that the river in Varanasi has risen and has flooded and caused the most extraordinary devastation to all those people who live there. And it shows that just being designated a smart city does not necessarily make a city smart in responding to what natural powers can do. So I think we'd like to say all the best for everyone who lives in Banaras and all of you, and may those flood waters recede and allow the beauties of Banaras to rise again.
Thank you.